They didn't look at you the same after that day. You felt it. You walked into the room, and everything quieted just a second too long. They glanced, they registered, and they moved on. But something changed. Not in them, in you. That was the moment you realized silence doesn't mean they understand you. It means they've already placed you. And you let them. Respect isn't given. You know that. But what no one tells you is this. It's not earned either. Not the way you were taught. You thought being kind, clear, competent was enough. You thought proving your value would make them see it. You thought speaking up would finally get you heard. But respect doesn't live in volume. It lives in restraint. You've been trying to explain yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. You've been chasing clarity with people who thrive in confusion. You've been soft with people who confuse softness for submission. And now you're here, still standing, but exhausted. Not because you're weak, but because you keep playing by rules they don't even follow. Let me say something you already know, but no one dares admit. They don't disrespect you because you're not enough. They disrespect you because they're used to you needing something. Approval, attention, acceptance, connection. They know what to expect from you. That's the problem. They don't fear losing you. That's the mistake. And here's the part that stings. They can smell it. Desperation, even when it's quiet. Especially when it's quiet. You say nothing, but your eyes are loud. Your body still leans forward. Your soul still flinches at rejection. You're invisible, but you're not unreadable. They read you. They just don't respect what they see. You want them to feel your presence? Then remove the one thing that made them comfortable. Your availability. Not your time. Your emotional openness. Your predictability. The warmth they didn't earn, but always expected. You've been afraid that pulling back makes you cold. Number. It makes you sovereign. There's a kind of silence that makes people curious, then nervous, then submissive. That's the silence you're about to learn. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or quietly disrespected, not because you were weak, but because you were too available, then this is where that ends. There's a reason Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved. But most people miss the deeper truth. You don't need to be feared. You just need to be unreadable. If you felt that shift beginning in you, subscribe. If you're ready to stop being understood and start being respected, leave a comment below, not for attention but for declaration. They didn't notice when you disappeared. They noticed when you came back different. Not louder, not bolder, just less interested. You didn't make an announcement. You didn't give a speech. You just stopped performing, and suddenly they had questions. Not the kind they asked out loud, the kind they whispered to themselves. Did something happen? Why does it feel different around them? But they'd never admit that they feel it, the shift, the unease, the gap in energy, the absence of your need. You used to walk into a room scanning for belonging. Now you walk in with stillness, with silence, and silence makes people uneasy because they can't use it, can't argue with it, can't twist it into something weak or controllable. People don't fear rage, they fear stillness. Rage is readable. Stillness is strategy. You're not cold, you're calculating, and they feel it. They want to know what you're thinking, but you've stopped giving them access. You've stopped volunteering your emotions like offerings. You've stopped explaining your reactions, defending your boundaries, justifying your absence. And suddenly, you're powerful. Because you no longer need them to feel okay about who you've become. Here's the part they'll never say out loud. They preferred you uncertain, easier to manage, easier to pin down. Your self-doubt was their leverage, your openness was their opportunity. And your need to be seen made you a mirror, not a mystery. They don't like that they can't read you now. Because unreadable people are dangerous. You don't react, you observe. You don't chase, you withdraw. You don't ask, you disappear. You've stopped negotiating with people who mistook your kindness for currency. You've stopped answering questions that were never meant to understand you, only to control you. And you've started to realize something brutal. They were never intimidated by your power. They were addicted to your compliance. The moment you changed the terms, they changed their tone. You didn't have to raise your voice. You just had to stop softening your presence. And suddenly, they started second-guessing themselves, reading between lines that don't exist, trying to figure out how they lost control without a single argument, without a single threat. But you didn't take control. You just stopped giving it away. That's the trick. Machiavelli never said to be violent. He said to be calculating, disciplined, unreadable, because the person who speaks less controls more. You've become the silence they can't decipher, the presence they can't place, the one who no longer plays by emotional terms they didn't earn. And now, they watch you, not because you're loud, but because you're gone. And what's gone haunts them. They didn't mean the apology. You know that now. They only said it because you didn't react, because you didn't beg for it, because you didn't flinch, because you looked them dead in the eye and gave them nothing. No tension, no expression, no signal that they still had influence over your emotional climate. That's what broke them. Not the argument, not the silence. Your detachment. See, the moment you no longer need closure, you become closure. There's a look in your eyes now they can't quite place. Not anger, not distance, something colder, something clearer, like you've seen too much to pretend anymore. You used to reach for understanding. You used to crave resolution. Now, you understand something deeper. Most people only make peace when they sense you've already made war and won. You didn't scream. You didn't explain. You just decided they no longer had access. That's when the fake apologies started rolling in. Not because they felt guilt, but because they felt uncertainty. And people will always try to apologize when they feel power slipping, when they don't know where they stand, when they realize their role in your life is no longer stable. They call you cold now, but it's not coldness. It's cost. They're just not used to being held accountable by silence. They're used to your forgiveness being free. Now it's expensive. Now they have to earn clarity. Now they have to question your tone. Now they have to sit with the weight of your unreadable presence and wonder, what changed? You changed. You stopped narrating your worth. You stopped proving your intentions. You stopped trying to be seen and became impossible to ignore. There's a psychological trick they never taught you growing up. The less you say, the more they imagine. You give them no reaction, they start questioning themselves. You give them no explanation, they start inventing reasons. You give them no validation, and suddenly they start validating you in their own mind just to restore balance. This is presence. Machiavellian in design, surgical in execution. Not performance, not pretending, precision. You don't owe anyone the luxury of reading you like an open book, especially those who only flip your pages to find flaws. You've burned that book. You're writing a new one. One with no explanations, no justifications, no forewords written by people who never understood the plot. And now, they respect you. They won't say it, but they've adjusted their tone. They've stopped interrupting you. They double-take when you walk past. They reread your last message because they feel the gap now, the weight, the absence of your need. Respect is never earned through effort. It's earned through indifference, because when they realize they can't move you, they start moving around you. There was a moment not loud, not dramatic, where they looked at you, and you didn't look back. Not in defiance, not in echo, just disinterest. And that moment hit them harder than any insult could. Because before that, they could feel your hunger, your desire to be seen, respected, invited in. You smiled too quickly, agreed too often, stayed too long, and they never said it, but they loved it. Loved the access, loved the control. But now they feel it. The shift. You're not angry. You're not hurt. You're just no longer offering anything. And that emptiness, it terrifies them. Because when someone becomes unreadable, they become a mirror, and mirrors expose weakness. You used to reflect their power back to them with approval, with attention, with your need to be chosen. Now, you reflect their insecurity, their irrelevance, their lack of impact. You've become immune. And immunity is the one thing power can't seduce. Let's be clear. They haven't changed. You have. They're still subtle manipulators, still transaction-minded, still performing decency when it serves them, but they don't know how to perform around silence. And that's what you've become. Strategic silence. A question mark in a world full of people begging for punctuation. They want to pull you back in. They won't do it directly, they know better now. So they test. They bait. They pretend to compliment. They try to joke their way back into familiarity. They send out feelers, not for reconnection, for control. But it doesn't land anymore. Because the person they're speaking to now doesn't speak, unless it matters. You've killed the version of yourself that needed to be understood. And when that version died, so did their ability to manipulate you. You no longer fill in the gaps for people. You let the silence rot. You no longer soften your edges. You let them cut. And you no longer ask to be seen. You just vanish and force them to wonder what they lost. Because here's the truth. When people can't read you, they start reading themselves. And most of them don't like what they find. They remember things they said, looks they gave, power plays they made, and they realize all the things they dismissed, all the games they played, they were only possible because you allowed it. And now, you don't. They call it ego. You call it standard. They call it distance. You call it clarity. They say you've changed. You say, finally. The more you stop explaining, the more they expose themselves. That's what unreadable presence does. It doesn't demand respect. It extracts it. Because when people no longer have emotional access to you, they either rise or disappear. Either way, you win. You were never too kind. You were just too available. And when something is always available, it stops being valuable. They won't admit it, but they measured your worth by your reaction speed. How fast you replied, how quickly you forgave, how easy you made it for them to come and go. You didn't charge them anything to cross your boundaries. That was the problem. They felt safe not because they respected you, but because they knew you wouldn't leave. But then something subtle happened. You didn't announce your exit. You just stopped opening the door. No more availability. No more instant replies. No more emotional credit extended to people who couldn't even pay attention. And that's when the panic set in. Not dramatic, not visible, just a quiet unraveling in the way they tried to reconnect, the way they lingered longer in conversations, the way they started asking questions with layered meanings, testing you, measuring the distance. But the distance was already permanent, because you had learned something unforgivable. The people who benefit from your availability will never protect your value. They don't want you gone. They want you close enough to use, far enough to control. But when you no longer crave their nearness, they lose leverage. And it wasn't your presence that made them feel powerful. It was your response, your need to clarify, to clean up, to make things right. Take that away, and they start to fade. They can't figure you out now. And what people can't figure out, they obsess over. You're no longer reacting, so now they're performing for silence. You're no longer explaining, so now they're spinning theories. You're no longer reaching, so now they're grasping. They thought you were kind. No, you were generous. With time, with truth, with attention. And they wasted it. Now, you're not cold. You're closed. They didn't see the warning signs, because they were too busy enjoying the warmth. They didn't realize they were standing next to fire until it stopped burning for them. Machiavelli said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one has to do without one of the two." But most forget the second part. Men have less scruple in offending one who is beloved than one who is feared, because people offend those who don't hold consequence. They offend the open-hearted, the over-explaining, the always there, until one day, that person stops being available, and suddenly, they remember every line they crossed. Every time they said, You're too sensitive just to dodge accountability. Every time they rolled their eyes at your standards, every time they treated your attention like background noise. Now, silence. They talk carefully now. They move differently. They check before they assume, because the door they used to walk through freely is no longer theirs. You didn't slam it. You just stopped leaving it open. And that's what they'll never recover from. They always thought you'd come back. That's what they counted on, because you always did. After the disrespect, after the silence, after the subtle dig disguised as a joke, you always returned with understanding, with softness, with the kind of loyalty that made betrayal look easy. They depended on your forgiveness, weaponized your empathy, measured your worth by how quickly you forgot the way they made you feel. But something shifted. You didn't yell, you didn't threaten, you just didn't return. And that broke them in a way they'll never show. Not because they loved you, but because they lost control. You see, control doesn't always come with a raised voice. Sometimes it comes with casual disregard. The expectation that no matter how they treat you, you'll still be there, explaining, proving, reassuring. So when you stopped being predictable, they stopped feeling powerful. They'll never say it directly, but the signs are there. The hesitation in their voice, the uncertainty in their tone, the way they test the waters now before speaking, the way they mirror you, measured, contained, unreadable. Because once you stop being predictable, you stop being controllable. They call it acting different. You call it peace. They call you distant. You call it discipline. They say you've changed. And they're right. You've killed the version of yourself that made people feel comfortable disrespecting you. Now, they second-guess themselves. They analyze your silences. They obsess over your pauses. They chase the comfort they used to take for granted. And what hurts them most, you're no longer offering an explanation, because explanation is access. Explanation is vulnerability. Explanation is currency. And now you charge a price they can't afford. You don't smile to smooth the tension anymore. You let the tension stay, let it breathe, let it expose who can handle pressure and who folds under it. You're not building walls. You're becoming a vault. Because when people finally realize they never knew the real you, only the version of you they could manage, they panic. Now they want to know what you're thinking. Now they want to read your eyes. Now they want to understand what changed. But nothing changed. You just stopped performing for people who refuse to see you. They used to study your reactions to guide theirs. Now there's nothing to study. No flair, no anger, no softness. Just a calm, unreadable presence that makes them feel watched, without knowing what you see. And that's the trick. The real Machiavellian presence. Not dominance. Not threat. Stillness. Because stillness forces people to see themselves, and most can't handle the reflection. So now they watch you, trying to decipher the code they used to hold. But it's gone now. Not locked, destroyed. You no longer need to be respected. You command it by needing nothing. You've become the type of person people talk about when you leave the room, because your silence said more than your words ever did. It didn't end with a goodbye. It ended with nothing, and nothing hurts louder than closure. They searched for a signal, a final message, a flinch, a sign you still cared, but you were gone before they could recognize the absence, before they could name it, before they could twist it into guilt. Because you didn't leave out of pain. You left out of precision. Understand this. People don't regret what they did. They regret who they lost the ability to do it to. And once they realize you no longer react, no longer respond, no longer wait, they stop looking for your presence and start hunting for your weakness. But you don't leave breadcrumbs anymore. You've pulled back in a way they can't reverse. No argument, no threat, just emotional extinction. They replay old conversations now, trying to pinpoint the moment you detached. They remember that day you went quiet mid-sentence. That time you looked through them instead of at them. That message you left unread, without a single explanation. It's haunting, because it's not just what you withdrew. It's how you did it. Calculated, controlled, without noise, without need. You see, power isn't about being feared. Power is about being unreachable. Not in status, in emotion. You've stopped being a character in their story. You've become the plot twist they can't explain. And now they can't stop talking about you even in silence. That's the final Machiavellian move. Become the question they can't answer. You were never weak. You were just too close. And closeness is the enemy of clarity. Distance revealed everything. It showed you how much of their respect was conditional, how much of your value was proximity, how much of their affection was convenience. Now that you're gone, truly gone, they see the difference. They didn't lose the version of you they disrespected. They lost the version they never got to meet. The one with edges, boundaries, depth. You don't need them to remember you. You need them to never forget what it felt like to lose access to someone who once made them feel untouchable. Let that be their echo. Not your voice, not your name, your absence. Because presence is power, but absence is legacy. If this reflection made something shift inside you, subscribe. Not to be part of something, to leave something behind. Drop a comment if you're done asking for respect and ready to become the silence they can't recover from.